The hot summer sun beat down on Flight 287 as it sat motionless on the Atlanta runway. Dr. Amara Johnson wiped beads of sweat from her forehead and glanced at her watch for the third time in 5 minutes. The flight to San Francisco had already been delayed for over an hour, and the air conditioning inside the cabin wasn't keeping up with the Georgia heat. Dr. Johnson loosened her collar and took a deep breath. After delivering a groundbreaking presentation on cardiovascular health disparities at the National Medical Conference, her body and mind were exhausted. All she wanted was to get home, hug her family, and sleep in her own bed. But first, she desperately needed some water. The cabin felt like an oven. Children were becoming restless, and several passengers had removed their jackets. Dr. Johnson's throat was dry, and her medical training warned her about the dangers of dehydration, especially after a week of conference stress and little sleep. She pressed the call button above her seat. A small blue light began to glow. 1 minute passed, then 5, then 10. No one came. Through the narrow airplane window, Dr. Johnson could see luggage handlers still loading suitcases into the plane's belly. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're still waiting for clearance from air traffic control. We appreciate your patience as we expect to be departing within the next 20 minutes. A collective groan rippled through the cabin. Dr. Johnson pressed the call button again, and this time she noticed a flight attendant making her way down the aisle. The attendant, whose name tag read Rita, was handing out cups of water to several passengers who appeared uncomfortable in the heat. Hope rising, Dr. Johnson prepared to make her simple request. But as Rita approached her row, something strange happened. The flight attendant's eyes seemed to skip right over her, moving from the passenger in front directly to the person sitting behind. Maybe she didn't see me, Dr. Johnson thought, giving Rita the benefit of the doubt. She raised her hand politely as the attendant passed by. "Excuse me," Dr. Johnson said with a smile. "Could I please have some water too?" Rita's eyes flicked toward her for just a second. There was a moment of recognition. Dr. Johnson was sure of it. But then the flight attendant continued down the aisle without acknowledging the request. Confused, Dr. Johnson watched as Rita handed cups of water to 3 more passengers across the aisle, all of whom happened to be white. The doctor looked down at her own dark skin and professional attire, wondering if she had somehow become invisible. That was odd, she thought. Maybe she's coming back with water for this section. But Rita disappeared into the galley at the back of the plane. 10 more minutes passed. The cabin grew hotter. Dr. Johnson's mouth felt like sandpaper, and a dull headache was forming behind her eyes. Clear signs of dehydration that she recognized from her medical training. She pressed the call button a 3rd time. This time, Rita returned quickly, but with an obvious look of irritation as she approached Dr. Johnson's seat. "Yes?" the flight attendant asked, her tone clipped and impatient. "I'm sorry to bother you," Dr. Johnson said, her voice remaining professional despite her discomfort. "But I've been trying to get some water. I'm feeling quite dehydrated in this heat." Rita's response was immediate and cold. "You'll have to wait until the beverage service begins after takeoff." Dr. Johnson glanced across the aisle where an elderly white man was sipping from a cup that Rita had just provided minutes earlier. The contradiction was impossible to miss. "I understand you're busy," Dr. Johnson said quietly, "but I noticed others receiving water, and as a physician, I'm concerned about dehydration symptoms I'm experiencing." At the mention of her being a doctor, something in Rita's expression changed, not to respect but to something harder, almost like disbelief or resentment. "As I said," Rita replied louder than necessary, "you'll need to wait for the beverage service like everyone else." The exchange didn't go unnoticed. A young man 2 rows back had been watching the whole interaction with growing concern. Lee Wei, a software engineer heading home after visiting family in Atlanta, felt uncomfortable witnessing what appeared to be clearly unfair treatment. As Rita walked away and Dr. Johnson slumped back in her seat, Lee discreetly took out his phone and began recording. When Rita passed by his seat a few minutes later, Lee asked for water and received it immediately with a smile. The contrast was striking and his camera captured it all. Dr. Johnson tried one final time, pressing her call button as beads of sweat formed on her temples. This time she was direct but still professional. "Excuse me, I really need some water. I'm a cardiologist and I'm showing signs of dehydration that could become a medical issue if not addressed." Rita's response, caught clearly on Lee's video, would soon be seen by millions. "If you're really a doctor, then you should know how to wait patiently without disrupting the entire flight. Please don't press the call button again until we're in the air." The passenger sitting next to Dr. Johnson, an older woman named Helen, was shocked by the exchange. She quietly offered her own unopened bottle of water that she had brought on board. "Thank you," Dr. Johnson whispered, her hands slightly shaking as she accepted the small act of kindness that shouldn't have been necessary. What no one on that hot, delayed airplane knew was that this seemingly small moment of discrimination would spiral into national news by nightfall. The airline's stock would take a historical plunge. Social media would erupt in outrage, and a respected doctor's simple request for water would spark a conversation about everyday discrimination that would reach the highest levels of corporate America. As the plane finally began to taxi down the runway, Li Wei looked at the video he had captured and made a decision that would change many lives, including his own. With a few taps on his screen, he uploaded the evidence of what he had witnessed, adding a simple caption that would soon become a viral hashtag: "Flying while black." Li Wei's hands trembled slightly as the plane began its ascent. He stared at his phone screen, the video he'd just uploaded already gathering views. The Wi-Fi connection on the plane was spotty, but the upload had completed just before takeoff. He wondered if he'd done the right thing. What if he lost his job? What if no one cared? But the memory of Dr. Johnson's face, the mixture of confusion, hurt, and dignity, convinced him he couldn't stay silent. 30,000 feet below, the video was already beginning to spread like wildfire. Priya Sharma was scrolling through her feed during her lunch break at the hospital when she saw it. As a fellow doctor, something about the video grabbed her attention immediately. She watched it once, then twice, her soup growing cold beside her keyboard. Without hesitation, she shared it to her own page with the comment, "This is what we Palmai deal with every day. Even with our credentials, our expertise, our dedication, some people still see only our skin color. This doctor deserves better. We all do." By the time Dr. Johnson's plane reached cruising altitude, the view count had passed 10,000. By the time drink service finally began, and Rita deliberately avoided eye contact while placing a water cup on Dr. Johnson's tray, the count had reached 50,000. Lee checked his notifications during a bathroom break and was shocked. His phone was blowing up with comments, shares, and messages. Some people were calling him a hero. Others accused him of stirring up trouble where there was none. He slipped his phone back into his pocket, heart racing, suddenly aware that he'd become part of something much bigger than he'd anticipated. The real explosion happened when Damon Rodriguez, a popular social media influencer with millions of followers, shared the video with his audience. "This is what privilege and discrimination look like in real time, folks. Pay attention," he wrote. Within minutes, the hashtag #Flying While Black was trending nationally. As the plane began its descent into San Francisco, neither Dr. Johnson nor Rita had any idea of the storm brewing online. News organizations were already reaching out to Skyward Airlines for comment. The airline's social media team, caught unprepared for the crisis, issued a standard response. "We are aware of the video circulating and are investigating the situation. Skyward Airlines is committed to treating all passengers with respect." The canned response only fueled the fire. Olivia Chen, a journalist for a major news network, recognized Dr. Johnson from a medical fundraiser she had covered last year. "That's Dr. Amara Johnson," she messaged her editor. "She's one of the top cardiologists in the country. She just presented groundbreaking research on heart disease prevention last week. This is a big story." By the time Dr. Johnson turned her phone back on after landing, she had 37 missed calls, over 100 text messages, and thousands of notifications across her social media accounts. A colleague had texted, "Amara, you're trending on social media. Call me ASAP." Confused and slightly alarmed, she called her friend as she waited for her luggage. Have you seen the video? Her colleague asked. What video? Someone recorded what happened with that flight attendant. It's everywhere. Dr. Johnson felt her stomach drop. She opened her social media app and saw her own face staring back at her. The video already had over 2 million views. Comments poured in by the second, mostly supportive but some questioning whether the incident was really about race. Some commenters were already digging into her background, sharing links to her research papers and interviews. I never wanted this kind of attention, she whispered, leaning against a pillar in the baggage claim area. Meanwhile, across town, Skyward Airlines headquarters was in full crisis mode. The chief communications officer, David Patel, had been pulled from a family dinner when the notifications started flooding in. By 8 p.m., he had assembled an emergency team in the corporate conference room. We need a statement, and we need it. Now, he said, loosening his tie. The video doesn't look good for us. But we don't have all the facts yet, argued one team member. We should wait until we speak with the flight attendant. Social media isn't waiting, David countered, pointing to the live view count that had now surpassed 5 million. And neither are the news networks. They're all running with this story tonight. Outside the corporate bubble, real people continued to share the video and their own experiences. Healthcare workers shared stories of being mistaken for janitors or assistants despite their white coats and credentials. Black professionals of all types recounted similar experiences of being ignored or disrespected, while their white colleagues were treated differently. The story had touched a nerve that ran deep in American society. Helen Barnes, the kind passenger who had shared her water bottle with Dr. Johnson, was interviewed by a local news station when she arrived home. I was right there, she said, her voice shaking slightly with emotion. That poor doctor asked so politely multiple times. There was no reason to deny her water when others were receiving it. I've flown with Skyward for 20 years, but tonight, I cut up my loyalty card. By midnight, celebrities had begun to weigh in. Athletes, musicians, and actors with millions of followers shared the video and expressed outrage. Civil rights organizations issued formal statements. The National Medical Association released a powerful message of support. Dr. Johnson represents the best of our profession. The treatment she received represents the worst of our society. As dawn broke the next morning, Skyward Airlines stock futures were already dropping sharply. Financial analysts predicted a rough day ahead for the company. News crews gathered outside the airline's headquarters, waiting for an official response beyond the generic statement that had failed to calm the growing outrage. Dr. Johnson, who had finally made it home and hugged her worried family, sat at her kitchen table staring at her phone in disbelief. In less than 24 hours, a simple request for water had transformed her from a private person who preferred research labs to spotlights into the reluctant face of a national conversation about race, respect, and everyday discrimination. Her phone rang again. This time it was a producer from a morning news show, asking if she would share her story with their viewers. I'm just a doctor, she thought to herself. I never asked for this. But as she looked at the thousands of comments from people sharing similar experiences, Dr. Johnson realized that perhaps in this moment, being just a doctor wasn't enough. Sometimes when the spotlight finds you unexpectedly, you have a choice to make. Step back into the shadows or use that light to help others see. She picked up the phone. Robert Chen's alarm jolted him awake at 4:30 a.m. As Skyward Airlines CEO, he was used to early mornings but not urgent phone calls at such an hour. He fumbled for his phone in the darkness, his wife stirring beside him. Hello? He croaked. Robert, it's Anita. You need to see what's happening. The voice of his chief communications officer was tight with tension. What's going on? He sat up, instantly alert. We're in the middle of a PR nightmare. A video of one of our flight attendants denying water to a black passenger, a doctor no less, has gone viral. Every major news outlet is running with it, and our social media is being flooded. Robert rubbed his eyes, trying to process this information. How bad is it? There was a pause on the other end of the line. I've been doing this job for 20 years, Robert. This is as bad as I've seen. And the stock market opens in 5 hours. By 5:15 a.m., Robert was showered, dressed, and in the back of a town car heading to headquarters. His phone buzzed constantly with messages from board members, executives, and the company's legal team. He pulled up the video watching as the flight attendant, Rita Connors, a Skyward employee for 15 years, clearly ignored Dr. Johnson's request while serving water to others. "This doesn't look good," he muttered to himself. At the same moment, across town, Rita Connors was also waking up to a nightmare. Her phone had been ringing nonstop since midnight. Confused and groggy, she'd finally answered a call from her supervisor. "Rita, have you seen the video?" the supervisor asked without preamble. "What video? Check your email, now, and don't talk to any reporters." Rita's hands shook as she opened her laptop. There she was, in her uniform, clearly visible as she dismissed Dr. Johnson's request. The comments beneath the video were vicious, with thousands of people calling for her firing, some even posting her personal information online. "But this isn't the whole story," she whispered to her empty apartment. "They don't understand." Back at Skyward headquarters, the crisis team had assembled in the main conference room. The large screen at the front displayed multiple news channels, all running the same story. The ticker at the bottom of CNBC showed Skyward's stock in pre-market trading, down 4% already. "What do we know about the passenger?" Robert asked, loosening his tie. Anita slid a folder across the table. "Dr. Amara Johnson, Harvard Medical School, Chief of Cardiology at San Francisco General. Multiple published papers. Volunteers at free clinics, spotless reputation." Robert winced. "And our flight attendant?" "Rita Connors. 15 years with us. Generally good reviews, but..." Anita hesitated. "There have been 2 previous complaints about differential treatment of minority passengers. Nothing that rose to this level, but it's in her file." The company's legal counsel cleared his throat. "Those previous complaints will come out. It's just a matter of time." By 7 a.m., news vans had gathered outside Skyward's headquarters. The stock market would open in 2.5 hours. Robert paced the conference room, weighing options with his team. "We need to get ahead of this," he said finally. "Draft a statement, expressing concern about the incident and announcing that the flight attendant has been placed on administrative leave, pending investigation." "Is that enough?" asked the youngest member of the team, Priya Desai from the social media department. "People are calling for immediate termination and a full apology." "We have to follow proper procedures," the legal counsel interjected. "We can't just fire her without..." "I understand the legal concerns," Robert interrupted, "but we're hemorrhaging public trust by the minute. Each hour we delay with a generic response costs us millions." On the TV screen, a financial analyst was speaking. "If Skyward doesn't get ahead of this crisis quickly, we could see their stock drop significantly when markets open. Companies in similar situations have lost anywhere from 5 to 15% of market value in a single day." The conference room fell silent as the implications sank in. 15% would represent over $600 million in lost value. "Minyankt, me see the statement," Robert said, reaching for the draft. At 8:15 a.m., Skyward Airlines released its first official statement. Skyward Airlines is deeply concerned by the video circulating on social media. "We take all allegations of discriminatory behavior seriously. The flight attendant involved has been placed on administrative leave while we conduct a thorough investigation. We value all our passengers and are committed to treating everyone with dignity and respect." The statement landed with a thud. Social media users immediately criticized it as corporate speak that didn't acknowledge wrongdoing or apologize to Dr. Johnson. News commentators pointed out the vague language and lack of concrete action. "That didn't work," Anita said, watching the online response in real time. "We're still bleeding." At 9:30 a.m., the opening bell of the stock market rang. Skyward Airlines' stock immediately dropped 6%. By 9:45, it was down 8%. Robert stared at the numbers in horror. "This is worse than we projected." "Sir," called his assistant from the doorway, "Dr. Johnson is on Good Morning America right now." The team turned to the TV. Dr. Johnson appeared, calm and composed as the interviewer asked about her experience. "I don't want to vilify one flight attendant or one airline," she said thoughtfully. What happened to me happens to black professionals every day across this country. We're questioned, ignored, or disbelieved because of how we look, regardless of our credentials or character. That's the real issue here. The interviewer leaned forward. Skyward Airlines has placed the flight attendant on leave and says they're investigating. Is that enough for you? Dr. Johnson paused. It's not about what's enough for me. It's about what's enough to ensure this doesn't happen to someone else. I would hope Skyward Airlines is examining their training procedures and considering how implicit bias affects their customer service. And yes, I think a personal apology would be appropriate. Her measured, professional response only made Skyward look worse by comparison. By noon, the stock had plummeted 12%, representing nearly $500 million in lost market value. The crisis team was now joined by board members calling in from around the country. Lunch sat untouched on the conference table as they debated next steps. We need to reach out to Dr. Johnson directly, Robert insisted, and we need a stronger public response. Our competitors are already capitalizing on this, noted the marketing director, showing advertisements from rival airlines highlighting their commitment to diversity and respect. At 2 p.m., Skyward's stock hit its lowest point, down 14.8%, a loss of almost exactly $600 million in market value in a single day. Robert. Chen stood at the window of his office, looking down at the news vans still camped outside. In 20 years of corporate leadership, he'd never seen anything like this. A company's reputation and value decimated in less than 24 hours because of one employee's actions captured on a 4-minute video. His phone rang. It was the board chairman. Robert, we need to talk about next steps, the chairman said, his voice grave. This isn't just about today's stock price. This is about the future of Skyward Airlines. As Robert turned from the window, he caught a glimpse of his own reflection in the glass, exhausted, worried, and suddenly aware that the real crisis was just beginning. The stock market would close in 2 hours, but rebuilding what they had lost would take far longer than that. I understand, he replied. I'm ready to do whatever it takes. Robert Chen stared at the faces of his board members on the video conference screen. 12 concerned executives looking to him for answers, for a way out of this nightmare. Our legal team advises caution, said Gregory Washington, the company's general counsel. A full apology could be seen as an admission of guilt and expose us to liability. With all due respect, Robert replied, we're beyond legal concerns now. We've lost $600 million in market value in one day. Our reputation is in tatters. The boardroom fell silent. Outside, the evening news crews were still camped at the company headquarters, broadcasting live updates on what social media had dubbed Watergate. I think we need outside help, said Nadia Patel, one of the newer board members. Someone who specializes in both crisis management and diversity issues. Robert nodded. I've already reached out to Tanya Washington. A murmur ran through the virtual meeting. Tanya Washington was known as the Corporate Crisis Whisperer, a former civil rights attorney who had built a consultancy helping companies navigate public relations disasters, particularly those involving issues of race and discrimination. She's expensive, someone commented. So is losing another $600 million tomorrow, Robert countered. By 9 p.m., Tanya Washington was seated across from Robert in his office, her keen eyes taking in his exhausted appearance. You're in a deep hole, she said without preamble. Your first statement was corporate garbage. It showed no humanity, no understanding of what happened or why people are upset. Robert winced but nodded. What do we do now? First, you need to reach out to Dr. Johnson personally, not with lawyers present, not with a script, but human to human. Second, you need a complete reset on your public response. People don't want corporate speak. They want to see that you understand the problem and are committed to real change. And Rita Connors? He asked, referring to the flight attendant. Tanya's face hardened slightly. The video is damning, and those previous complaints in her file make it worse. You need to complete the investigation quickly, but I think we both know where it's heading. While this conversation was happening, Dr. Amara Johnson was sitting, in her living room, surrounded by family and friends who had gathered to support her. Her phone continued to buzz with messages, interview requests, and alerts about the story. "I never wanted any of this," she said, rubbing her temples. "I just wanted some water." Her sister squeezed her hand. "You didn't ask for this spotlight, but now that you have it, you can use it for good." Dr. Johnson had already declined offers from aggressive attorneys suggesting massive lawsuits. That wasn't who she was. But she did want accountability and, more importantly, change. Her phone rang again. An unknown number. "Dr. Johnson, this is Robert Chen, CEO of Skyward Airlines. I was hoping we could talk." The next morning, Robert Chen stood before a podium at Skyward's headquarters, cameras flashing as he addressed the gathered press. His appearance was a stark contrast to the company's previous statement. No PR team flanking him, no corporate backdrop, just a man taking responsibility. Yesterday, a video surfaced showing one of our flight attendants denying a simple request for water from Dr. Amara Johnson while providing water to other passengers. "I have spoken personally with Dr. Johnson, and I want to publicly apologize to her for this treatment. What happened was wrong, period." He paused, looking directly into the cameras. "I've heard people ask if this was about race. After reviewing the video and speaking with witnesses, I believe that unconscious bias played a role in this incident. As CEO, I take responsibility for creating a culture where this could happen." The press room buzzed with surprise at his candor. Corporate leaders rarely admitted to racial bias so explicitly. Effective immediately, Rita Connors has been terminated from Skyward Airlines. Our investigation revealed this was not an isolated incident, and her actions violated our service standards and values. Robert took a deep breath before continuing. "But firing one employee doesn't solve the larger problem. Today I'm announcing a comprehensive overhaul of our training programs, focusing on recognizing and addressing unconscious bias. We're creating a new executive position, Chief Diversity Officer, who will report directly to me. And we're revising our service protocols to ensure all passengers receive equal treatment." As he spoke, Skyward's stock began to stabilize for the first time since the crisis began. Across town, Dr. Johnson watched the press conference on her tablet during a break between patients. She had returned to work, determined not to let the incident disrupt her responsibilities to her patients. After speaking with Robert Chen the previous night, she had been surprised by his directness and willingness to listen. Their conversation had lasted over an hour, moving beyond the incident itself to discuss broader issues of bias in professional settings. He had asked thoughtful questions and taken notes. Most importantly, he hadn't tried to minimize what happened or offer excuses. At the end of their call, he had made a surprising request. Now at the press conference, Robert was announcing it publicly. "Finally, I'm honored to share that Dr. Amara Johnson has agreed to serve as a special advisor to Skyward Airlines as we develop our new training programs. Her insights as both a medical professional and someone who has experienced bias firsthand will be invaluable." The announcement caused another stir among the reporters. It was unprecedented for the subject of such an incident to partner with the company involved. After the press conference, Robert returned to his office where Tanya Washington waited. "You did well," she said. It was honest without being defensive. "Will it be enough?" he asked. "That depends on what happens next. Words are just words until they're backed by actions." As the day progressed, the public response to Skyward's new approach began to shift. While many remained skeptical, others praised the company's transparency and concrete steps. Importantly, major corporate clients who had been considering canceling their contracts decided to wait and see. By closing bell, Skyward's stock had recovered 2% of its massive loss. Later that evening, Dr. Johnson received a call from the National Medical Association, asking if she would speak at their upcoming conference about her experience and her decision to work with Skyward. "I'm not an expert on corporate diversity," she protested. "But you are an expert on turning a painful moment into positive change," the caller replied. "People are inspired by your approach. You didn't just call for punishment, you pushed for transformation." After hanging up, Dr. Johnson sat quietly, reflecting on how much had changed in just 48 hours. From being denied water on a plane to advising a major corporation and speaking at conferences, none of it had been planned or expected. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Li Wei, the passenger who had recorded the video. Just saw the news. You're amazing for turning this into something positive. Still sorry you had to go through it at all. Dr. Johnson smiled as she replied, Sometimes the most important journeys start with the most unexpected moments. Thank you for having the courage to record what happened. Across the city, Robert Chen was still at his desk, reviewing resumes for the new Chief Diversity Officer position. The past 2 days had been the most challenging of his career. The crisis wasn't over, far from it. But for the first time, he saw a path forward. His assistant knocked on the door. The team from the training department is here to discuss the new protocols. Robert nodded, straightening his tie. The real work was just beginning. 6 months later, Dr. Amara Johnson stood before a packed audience at the National Healthcare Conference. Her presentation wasn't about cardiology this time, but about something equally close to her heart. When I asked for water on that flight, I never imagined it would lead to this moment, she said, gesturing to the slides behind her showing the new equity and healthcare initiative she had founded. But sometimes life gives you unexpected opportunities to create change. In the 6 months since the incident, Dr. Johnson had become a reluctant but powerful voice for addressing bias in both the airline industry and healthcare. Her foundation had already raised over $5 million, including the $2 million donation from Skyward Airlines, to support minority medical students and research on healthcare disparities. In the front row sat Robert Chen, now a friend as well as a professional ally. Beside him was Kimberly Thompson, Skyward's new Chief Diversity Officer, a former civil rights attorney who had spent the past 5 months restructuring the airline's approach to training and customer service. After Dr. Johnson's presentation, Robert met her in the hallway. That was incredible, he said, handing her a coffee. You've turned something painful into real progress. She smiled, accepting the coffee with a nod. How are things at Skyward? Different, he said thoughtfully. Better, I think. Our quarterly customer satisfaction surveys show improvement. The new training program has been implemented across all hubs. And our stock, he paused. It's almost recovered. Almost? We're still down about 2% from where we were before the incident. Financial analysts say it might take a full year to completely recover. Dr. Johnson nodded. And how about Rita? Robert's expression grew serious. Last I heard, she's working for a smaller regional airline. She completed the bias awareness program we offered, but he shrugged. Some lessons are learned the hard way. Across town in a modest apartment, Rita Connors was preparing for her shift with Mid-State Airways. The past 6 months had been difficult. The public shaming, the death threats, losing her job of 15 years, and the struggle to find new employment. She sat at her kitchen table, flipping through a training manual very different from her new employer. The incident with Dr. Johnson had forced her to confront uncomfortable truths about herself. Biases she hadn't wanted to acknowledge, assumptions she made based on appearance. The mandatory counseling sessions had been painful, but necessary. Time to go, she murmured to herself, closing the manual. She was determined not to make the same mistakes again. Second chances didn't come easily. Meanwhile, Li Wei had found his own life changed by his decision to record that video 6 months ago. What had begun as an instinctive reaction to witnessing injustice had turned into a new path. He'd started a popular social media channel focused on everyday acts of courage and accountability. It doesn't take grand gestures to change the world, he often told his growing audience. Sometimes it just takes the courage to document truth in the moment it happens. His video of the flight incident was now being used in training programs at airlines, hotels, and hospitals across the country as an example of how quickly a single interaction could escalate into a major crisis, and how easily it could have been avoided with simple human respect. Back at Skyward Airlines headquarters, the boardroom that had once been the site of panic and crisis management was now hosting a different kind of meeting. Representatives from other major airlines had gathered for the first Industry Equity Coalition, a group Robert had initiated to share best practices for addressing bias in customer service. "We're competitors in business," Robert told the assembled executives, "but we should be allies in making our industry more equitable and respectful for all passengers." Some of the airlines had joined reluctantly, aware of the public relations benefits but skeptical of making real changes. Others, having watched Skyward's painful public lesson, were genuinely committed to avoiding similar situations. "What happened to our company could happen to any of yours," Robert said candidly. "It only takes one employee, one moment, one passenger with a smartphone. But this isn't just about avoiding PR disasters. It's about doing what's right." As the meeting progressed, Kimberly Thompson presented data showing that Skyward's new protocols had not only improved customer satisfaction scores among minority passengers but had actually improved efficiency and ratings across all demographics. "Treating people with respect isn't just morally right," she explained. "It's good business." The real test of Skyward's changes came 3 months later, when another video involving the airline began circulating online. This time it showed a Skyward flight attendant going out of her way to help an elderly passenger who was struggling to communicate in English. The attendant's patience and respect were evident in every frame. The video went viral too, but for entirely different reasons. Skyward Cares began trending, with many commenters noting the contrast to the previous year's incident. "This is what change looks like," Dr. Johnson told her colleagues when they shared the video with her. "Not perfect, but progress." 1 year to the day after the original incident, Dr. Johnson boarded another Skyward flight, this time intentionally. She had been invited to speak at their annual leadership conference about the ongoing collaboration between her foundation and the airline. As she settled into her seat, a flight attendant approached. "Dr. Johnson, we're honored to have you on board today. Can I get you anything? Perhaps some water?" They both smiled at the reference, acknowledging how far things had come. "Water would be wonderful, thank you," she replied. As the plane took off, Dr. Johnson looked out the window at the city below, growing smaller as they climbed into the clouds. She thought about the strange journey of the past year, how a moment of disrespect had somehow led to meaningful change, how a simple request for water had rippled outward to affect an entire industry. Her phone buzzed with a text from her sister. Saw that Skyward stock finally exceeded its pre-incident value today. Poetic timing. Dr. Johnson smiled. The financial recovery was significant, but it wasn't the most important measure of progress. The real success was in the thousands of passengers who would never know what it felt like to be ignored or dismissed because of how they looked. The real value was in the young medical students her foundation was supporting, who would carry forward a more equitable approach to healthcare. As the flight attendant returned with her water, Dr. Johnson accepted it with a thank you and a silent acknowledgement that sometimes change begins with the smallest of actions. A request, a recording, a decision to speak up or listen. And sometimes transformation happens not because we seek it, but because circumstances push us to confront the truth we needed to see all along. "Is there anything else I can get for you, Dr. Johnson?" the attendant asked. "No, thank you," she replied. "I have everything I need."